Welcome to the Discourse Analyzer AI Toolkit, where articles come alive. You're listening to the audio version of our article. For the full text and an interactive experience, check out the link in the description below. Interact with any selection using our AI assistant to enhance your understanding. Let's explore.
Political speeches in discourse analysis. In discourse analysis, political speeches serve as a rich source for understanding how language is used to shape public opinion, construct identities, negotiate power, and influence ideologies. Political speeches are a form of persuasive communication designed to mobilize audiences, justify policies, and position speakers as credible and authoritative figures. By analyzing the linguistic features, rhetorical strategies, and underlying ideologies in political speeches, discourse analysts can uncover how language reflects and constructs political realities. Political speeches are not just about conveying information. They're tools for framing issues, constructing narratives, and legitimizing authority. Through discourse analysis, researchers can explore how political figures use language to establish their ethos, appeal to emotions, and promote specific worldviews. Furthermore, political speeches often reveal underlying power dynamics and cultural values, making them a key focus in the study of discourse. Key features of political speeches in discourse analysis. Point 1. Rhetorical strategies. Political speeches often employ various rhetorical devices to persuade, influence, and inspire audiences. These strategies include the use of metaphor, repetition, appeals to emotion, pathos, appeals to logic, logos, and appeals to credibility, ethos. Discourse analysis focuses on how these rhetorical tools are used to shape public perceptions, influence opinions, and create a specific narrative. Example: in Barack Obama's 2008 victory speech, he repeatedly used the phrase, "Yes, we can," to inspire hope and create a collective sense of purpose. The use of repetition reinforced his message of change and unity, galvanizing support for his presidency. Point 2. Framing of issues. Framing refers to how political speeches present and define particular issues, influencing how they are perceived by the audience. Through issue framing, political leaders control the narrative around key topics, determining what aspects of an issue are emphasized and which are downplayed. Discourse analysts examine how language is used to frame policies, crises, or conflicts to sway public opinion. Example: in speeches about terrorism, some politicians frame the issue as a war on terror, using metaphors of battle and conflict. This framing promotes a militarized response and justifies actions such as surveillance or military intervention. Analyzing this framing allows researchers to explore how language constructs public understanding of terrorism and security. Point 3. Identity construction. Political speeches play a critical role in constructing the identity of both the speaker and the audience. Politicians use language to establish their personal credibility, authority, and connection to specific values, often aligning themselves with national identities or moral ideals. Discourse analysis also examines how political leaders construct the identities of their opponents, often creating binary distinctions between us, the in-group, and them, the out-group. Example: in Donald Trump's campaign speeches, he frequently positioned himself as a champion of the forgotten American, constructing an identity of being an outsider fighting against a corrupt establishment. At the same time, he framed immigrants as outsiders, constructing a clear us versus them dynamic to appeal to nationalist sentiments. Point 4. Ideological positioning. Political speeches are often a vehicle for promoting specific ideologies, sets of beliefs and values that shape how people understand the world. Discourse analysis examines how political leaders use language to promote or challenge dominant ideologies, whether related to nationalism, democracy, capitalism, socialism, or other political frameworks. By analyzing political speeches, researchers can identify the underlying values and ideologies that are being advanced. Example: Margaret Thatcher's speeches in the 1980s promoted a neoliberal ideology, emphasizing individual responsibility, free markets, and reduced government intervention. Her use of phrases like, "There is no alternative" to the free market positioned neoliberalism as the only viable economic solution, Shaping public discourse around government and economic policy. Point 5. Emotional appeals and pathos. Political speeches often rely on emotional appeals to connect with the audience on a personal level, inspiring feelings of hope, fear, anger, or pride. Discourse analysis explores how political leaders use language to evoke specific emotions and how these emotional responses are linked to political action or support. Example: after the 9/11 attacks, George W. Bush's speeches emphasized themes of fear and national security, appealing to the audience's sense of vulnerability and patriotism. He used emotionally charged language to build support for the war on terror, invoking fear of future attacks to justify military actions abroad. Point 6. Intertextuality and historical references. Political speeches often draw on previous speeches, historical events, or cultural narratives, a concept known as intertextuality. By referencing past events or speeches, political leaders create continuity with historical moments, align themselves with revered figures, or evoke national memories. Example: in his 1963 "I Have a Dream" speech, Martin Luther King Jr. drew on the language of the Bible, the U.S. Constitution, and Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address to lend weight to his vision of racial equality. These intertextual references connected the civil rights movement to broader American ideals of freedom and justice, reinforcing the legitimacy of his cause. Methods for analyzing political speeches in discourse analysis. Point 1. Critical discourse analysis, CDA. Critical discourse analysis, CDA, is a powerful tool for examining how political speeches reflect and reinforce power dynamics, ideologies, and social structures. CDA focuses on uncovering the hidden power relations and ideologies embedded in political language, paying attention to how discourse legitimizes authority or marginalizes certain groups. Example: a CDA of Viktor Orban's speeches on immigration in Hungary might reveal how his language frames refugees as threats to national sovereignty and culture, reinforcing xenophobic and nationalist ideologies. The analysis would focus on how his discourse consolidates political power by appealing to fears of foreign influence and promoting an exclusionary vision of national identity. Point 2. Rhetorical analysis. Rhetorical analysis examines the persuasive techniques used in political speeches, focusing on how rhetorical strategies such as ethos, logos, and pathos are deployed to influence the audience. This method looks at how political leaders build credibility, ethos, appeal to reason and evidence, logos, and stir emotions, pathos. Example: in an analysis of Winston Churchill's wartime speeches, rhetorical analysis might focus on how Churchill used ethos to position himself as a reliable and courageous leader, logos to provide factual updates on the war effort, and pathos to invoke British resilience and determination. His famous line, "We shall fight on the beaches," exemplifies how rhetorical strategies can mobilize a nation in times of crisis. Point 3. Framing analysis. Framing analysis explores how political speeches present issues by focusing on certain aspects of a situation while omitting others. This method examines the specific language used to highlight problems, assign blame, and suggest solutions, revealing how the framing of an issue shapes public opinion and policy preferences. Example: in analyzing Barack Obama's speeches on healthcare reform, framing analysis might reveal how he framed the issue in terms of access to healthcare as a human right, while opponents framed it as government overreach or socialized medicine. These competing frames influence how the public perceives the debate and which policies they are likely to support. Point 4. Metaphor analysis. Metaphor analysis examines how metaphors in political speeches shape understanding by linking abstract political issues to more familiar or concrete experiences. Metaphors help simplify complex issues, making them more relatable to the audience, but they also carry ideological implications. Example: in analyzing Ronald Reagan's political speeches, metaphor analysis might focus on his use of the government as the problem metaphor. By framing government intervention as a hindrance to freedom and economic growth, Reagan advanced a conservative, anti-government ideology that influenced public opinion and policy for decades. Examples of political speeches in discourse analysis. Example 1. Franklin D. Roosevelt's Day of Infamy speech. In his famous speech following the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, Franklin D. Roosevelt framed the event as a day of infamy, using strong emotional appeals to unite the American public in support of entering World War II. Discourse analysis of this speech would focus on Roosevelt's use of pathos, invoking anger and patriotism to galvanize public support for military action. The analysis would also explore how Roosevelt constructed the enemy as dishonorable, reinforcing a moral narrative that justified the war effort. Example 2. Nelson Mandela's inaugural speech. Nelson Mandela's 1994 inaugural speech as South Africa's first black president symbolized the end of apartheid and the beginning of national reconciliation. Discourse analysis of this speech would focus on how Mandela used language to construct a unified South African identity, promoting peace, forgiveness, and hope for a new democratic nation. His emphasis on building a rainbow nation frames South Africa's future in terms of inclusivity and diversity, reflecting the ideologies of equality and justice. Example 3. Theresa May's Brexit speech. In her 2017 Brexit speech, then Prime Minister Theresa May framed the UK's departure from the European Union as a global opportunity, rather than a retreat from internationalism. A discourse analysis of May's speech might focus on how she framed Brexit in terms of sovereignty and economic independence, using phrases like taking back control to appeal to national pride. The analysis would also examine how May downplayed the risks and uncertainties associated with Brexit, positioning it as a positive step for the UK's future. Challenges in analyzing political speeches through discourse. Point 1. Manipulation and ambiguity. Political speeches often contain ambiguous language or manipulative rhetoric, making it difficult to determine the true intentions behind the words. Politicians may deliberately use vague language to avoid controversy or to appeal to multiple audiences simultaneously. Discourse analysts must carefully navigate these complexities to uncover the implicit meanings in political speech. Point 2. Context dependence. The meaning and impact of a political speech are highly dependent on its historical, cultural, and political context. Discourse analysts must consider the specific context in which the speech was delivered to fully understand its significance and its effect on the audience. Example: a speech that might be seen as inspirational in one cultural or political setting could be perceived as inflammatory in another, depending on the values, ideologies, and historical events that shape the audience's interpretation. Point 3. Bias in interpretation. Discourse analysis itself can be influenced by the analyst's personal, political, or cultural biases. Researchers must practice reflexivity, critically reflecting on their own perspectives to ensure that their analysis is grounded in the data rather than shaped by preconceived notions. Conclusion. Political speeches are a key focus in discourse analysis, offering rich insights into how language is used to construct meaning, shape public opinion, and influence political outcomes. Through rhetorical strategies, framing, identity construction, and emotional appeals, political leaders use speeches to advance their agendas and legitimize their authority. By applying methodologies such as critical discourse analysis, rhetorical analysis, and framing analysis, researchers can uncover the hidden power dynamics and ideologies embedded in political discourse, revealing how language shapes the political landscape and influences public perceptions. Frequently asked questions. Why are political speeches important in discourse analysis? Political speeches are key texts in discourse analysis because they reveal how language is used to influence public opinion, construct identities, negotiate power, and promote ideologies. They offer insights into how political leaders communicate and shape political realities. What rhetorical strategies are commonly analyzed in political speeches? Rhetorical strategies such as metaphor, repetition, emotional appeals, pathos, logical arguments, logos, and credibility building, ethos, are often analyzed. These strategies help politicians persuade audiences, frame issues, and establish authority. How does framing function in political speeches? Framing refers to how political issues are presented to influence how the public understands them. By emphasizing or downplaying certain aspects of a topic, political figures control the narrative and shape perceptions of policies, crises, or conflicts. What role does identity construction play in political speeches? Politicians use language to construct their own identities as credible leaders and align themselves with specific values or ideals. They also construct the identities of their audiences and opponents, often creating a dynamic of us versus them. How is ideology embedded in political speeches? Political speeches promote or challenge ideologies by advancing certain values, beliefs, and worldviews. Discourse analysis uncovers how these ideologies are subtly reflected in language, shaping the audience's understanding of issues like nationalism, democracy, or capitalism. Why are emotional appeals significant in political discourse? Emotional appeals, pathos, connect with the audience on a personal level, often stirring feelings of hope, fear, or pride. These appeals can mobilize support, justify policies, or inspire action, making them a powerful tool in political communication. What is the role of intertextuality in political speeches? Intertextuality refers to the use of references to past speeches, historical events, or cultural narratives. Politicians use these references to lend authority to their message, connect with national history, or align themselves with revered figures or ideals. How does critical discourse analysis, CDA, approach political speeches? CDA examines political speeches to uncover hidden power relations, ideologies, and social structures. It analyzes how language is used to legitimize authority, marginalize groups, or reinforce dominance. What are the challenges in analyzing political speeches? Challenges include dealing with ambiguous or manipulative language, understanding the context in which the speech was delivered, and managing potential bias in interpretation. Researchers must consider the cultural and political context to fully understand the speech's impact. How does metaphor analysis enhance the study of political speeches? Metaphor analysis reveals how abstract political issues are framed in more relatable terms, influencing how audiences understand complex topics. Metaphors can simplify debates but also carry ideological implications.